Did you hear about our new sponsor, Learn It? One of the best ways to support your team is by investing in their growth through practical learning experiences. And that's exactly what Learn It delivers. Their short, live workshops focus on the essential human skills we all need, like empowering others, managing change, and team collaboration. As a Speak with People listener, you get a free 45-day trial for up to 20 people. Start today by heading to learnit.com/speakwithpeople or click the link in the show notes and start your journey to investing in providing great growth for your team. Welcome to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. We are the go-to resource for leaders looking to greatly improve their communication skills, whether it's one-on-one interactions, team settings, public speaking, or digital communication. By improving these skills, leaders can create stronger connections and drive positive change within their organizations. Each and every episode, we sit down with experts from various fields from around the world, just like you're grabbing a coffee with them, to dive into real, practical conversations. Our goal is to help you transform your communication skills so you can lead more effectively, build stronger relationships, and make a lasting impact. So go grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's learn together. Were you feeling stuck in your leadership, wondering how to consistently inspire, retain your clients? Here's the deal. You're not alone. Many leaders hit a wall when they stop growing, assuming they've learned all they need to learn to succeed. But what if I told you that probably your next level of success with your clients depends entirely on your willingness to keep learning? Well, I'm so excited for this episode of the Speak with People podcast. This is the place where great leaders learn how to communicate, how to connect, especially to do it with clarity and empathy. And today I am thrilled to interview a leader that I highly admire, the author of this great book, The Learn It All Leader. He's the CEO of an amazing company, and he's a fellow baseball lover and nut, and someone that I listen to his podcast religiously. Damon Lembi, thank you so much for being on the Speak with People podcast.
Jason, buddy, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
This is great. We were talking off camera, off record for, probably forever. So this is great that we finally get into the interview because we could keep going. And what I love about this is you are a return guest to the podcast. We have not had many return guests. We save it for the leaders who have provided so much amazing content. Your first interview was great. For those of our listeners who missed the first one, we'll put the link in the show notes, but give us a little bit of your story. Remind them who you are, what you do.
Since I'm a return guest, I certainly hope I get a shirt like you have on right now. Okay? I'm going to hold you to that. So Perfect. For your listeners, I'm Damon Lembi. I was born and raised in San Francisco, California. Long story short, growing up, it was all about sports for me. Like Jason mentioned, I'm a big baseball fan. And when I was in high school, I thought to myself, if I'm going to play college or professional sports, I need to go all in on something. And that was baseball. I realized baseball was my ticket. So I did. I went all in on baseball, and it worked out well for me. My senior year, I was a high school All-American, and I was also drafted by the Atlanta Braves in the 13th round of the 1990 draft. So I'm definitely aging myself here. And but it was one of my first big decisions I had to make, and it was also one of my first great leadership lessons I saw. My parents were awesome, and they said, "Look, Damon, you've come this far. It's up to you. It will support you whatever route you want to go. If you want to go minor league baseball, you can. If you want to go to college, Pepperdine will support you there." I chose the Pepperdine route, and I chose the Pepperdine route because when I met with the coach, Andy Lopez, he had this moonshot goal, this dream. He said, we're going to win the College World Series within 2 years, and we're going to do it through building up the talent of the team, and we think you'd be a great addition to this team. And now that's a moonshot goal. I mean, Pepperdine is a 2,500 person school, and you're going up against University of Texas, LSU, Arizona State. And so a lot of people back in the day thought he was nuts for having such a, powerful dream to win the College World Series. So I go to Pepperdine, and I I suffered from imposter syndrome. I was right off the bat. I was like, everybody is as good as I am. I'm not sure if I even belong here. And I really struggled, and I got some good stories about that. Anyways, I got hurt. I left. I had another chance. I went to Arizona State. And by the way, they won the College World Series the year I left. Pepperdine did. It was amazing. And I'm still in touch with Andy Lopez. I talk about him in my book a lot. I learned so much from him even in that 1 year. Went to Arizona State, played really well there, hit a home run in the College World Series, kind of like my glory days, my wife likes to say. Getting ready to be drafted again for the third time. I actually got drafted once more by the Yankees. Getting ready to draft by the third time. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And so I was 22 years old. My baseball career ended, and it's kind of a big hit to my identity. I always thought I was a baseball player. Wasn't sure if my skills were transferable. And so I was fortunate enough to have a family who had multiple different businesses, some very large real estate businesses and hotels. But I started my career as a receptionist at this computer training company called Learn It.
Wow.
And I did that for two reasons. I wanted to show everybody that my dad, I wasn't just daddy's boy who put him in a senior leader position, but quite frankly, I didn't know if my skills were transferable. So I took the job as a receptionist. 5 years later, I became the CEO, and we've trained over 2 million people, and that's kind of where we are today.
Wow. Absolutely incredible. Drafted 3 times.
Twice. The third time, twice. When I thought for sure I was ready to go and sign, I don't know. Maybe I was a Moneyball player before Moneyball was something, but it didn't happen, and everything happens for a reason, so it is what it is.
Wow. That's absolutely incredible. And just being able to learn that and do that. And I love the story about your coach. I mean, even it's crazy. I have a mentor. I met him in a public speaking class in college in 95. And he still keeps up with me. I actually write about him in my book because he always asks questions. And I'm like, 30 years. It's just amazing. Those mentors who, have that life history with us is just incredible.
Yeah, it's you look back, and whether it's people that you were coaches of yours in high school, or even leaders or bosses you had early on in your career, it's amazing the impact that they've had on your life, especially the ones who know how to help you see the greatness that you have inside yourselves. Because a lot of times we don't see, what we're capable of accomplishing, and somebody like Andy Lopez and others really helped me with that.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the imposter syndrome. So I'm glad that I'm not alone in that, because I still have moments of that imposter syndrome, which is amazing because, as leaders, we're supposed to have it all together. So, or at least we think that at times. Walk us through. I mean, your company's trained 2 million leaders. I mean, just incredible. Walk us through, especially for leaders, to even in whatever industry, but for the people listening to this podcast, probably in this series, you're dealing in sales, you're financial advisors, you're doing client, focused. Why is it so important and essential to have somewhat of a habit and a process to kind of keep pushing yourself to learn?
I think it's critical. In my book, The Learn It All Leader, my tagline is kind of, great leaders aren't born or made, they're always in the making. And my definition, first of all, of leadership is it all starts with self-leadership. So you don't have to coach 100-person team like I have at Learn It, or, being a little league coach or whatever. I think we're all leaders in our own way. And it is critical to continue to have that journey of curiosity, of becoming a better problem solver, and learning agility. Really, I just got done interviewing earlier today this gentleman named Dave Brock, who's a legendary sales guy. You have to have him on your show. Dave's been around for a long, long time. And I asked him, I said, what is it about you who's had so much success that keeps up this curiosity and will to keep learning? And he just said, look, you have to, because if you want to continue to thrive and not get left behind, you got to always find ways to enhance your customer's experience, lead your team better. And you're not going to be able to do that if you're stuck in the mud with your own decisions and thoughts on ways to do things. You got to get out there and learn from different people with diverse opinions, diverse ideas, and continuously challenge your thought process. And that's something that I've always been a big believer in doing.
I love that. I don't mean to take us. I don't want to take us, down a tangent road, but it seems like to me in 2025, and I've only been on the planet 49 years. It'll be 50 in September. What you just talked about, a good amount of the people, it seems to be pushing against that. Why would I want to communicate with somebody who believes something different from me? But that's, leadership. We listen, we learn, so how do we, especially as leaders, how do we make sure we keep putting ourselves in those kind of seats or those opportunities to, even if we don't like what they're saying, listen, hear their perspective, learn.
I think it's critical. I think poor leaders look for confirmation bias. They want yes people. They want to surround themselves with people who tell them what they want to hear. And the problem with that in several cases is, first of all, people don't want to really work for individuals, leaders like that, because it's either my way or the highway. They're know-it-alls, right? And people want to work for leaders who are open, humble, and can look at diverse opinions and ideas, because when you do that, you're opening up doors and unlocking opportunities that you otherwise would really miss. And so leaders who are always like, it's my way or the highway, who are horrible at receiving feedback. And I think receiving feedback, Jason, is like one of the most important things that you can do as a leader, because it's like the fuel for learning. If you create an environment, if you create a culture of learning, I like to say, where people have that space and they can share feedback with you, they can come to the table with ideas, then you're going to get innovation and ideas bubbling up from everywhere, especially frontline workers who are, face to face or in touch with your customers on a regular, everyday basis.
Wow. You you so casually said, 4 or 5 like incredibly giant gold nuggets right there. But I just love the create a culture of learning. How many of our companies would experience a revolution if we did that, or if we gave them the tools? Because I think some of the companies I worked at, some of the people, even times in my life, I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know, I didn't know the books to read. I didn't know, some of those kind of things. So if there's someone listening who's, has the privilege of leading a team, what are some of the ways that they can, make sure that their team is becoming a culture of learning?
It all starts at the top. It all starts with the team leader or the CEO or however, and that's modeling the behavior. You need to model the behavior if you want to develop a culture of learning. Because if you're not open to learning and even being vulnerable and sharing, mistakes you made, nobody's going to want to do so either. And when I say a culture of learning, I'm not saying you have to have all kinds of formal training programs, which of course I believe in, but a culture of learning is creating the space where people can go out and they can try things without fear of failure. Stepping out of their comfort zone and try and learning things. And one of the best ways to create a culture of learning when it comes to designing programs is finding a champion internally who really wants to head up the program with buy-in from leadership, like I mentioned. And then they go out and they interview different people inside the organization to figure out, hey, what are some of the skill gaps or what are some of the areas of things that you want to learn? And a lot of times, Jason, I also recommend interviewing the newest people in your organization, people who have recently come on board and get their perspective. And I recommend, I've found that the best companies spend between 1% and 2% of annual revenue on investing in their people, whether through training, coaching, all that kind of stuff. Because if you do, think about the cost of attrition and the challenge of hiring and retaining top talent. I saw an article recently in McKinsey where it says it's 3 times more expensive to hire, onboard, and retain great talent than it is to actually invest in people's development.
Wow.
So spend that 1 or 2%. But if you're if you're on a shoestring budget, you could do little things. You could listen to your podcast and you could have everybody share back what they learned. You could send one person to a conference and have them come back and teach it back to everybody. You could do that with a book club. So there's very creative ways that you can turn your culture into a culture of learning. One other thing I want to say about that as well is don't always make it about work. Don't make everything that people learn about the work that they have. Give them opportunities, if possible, to learn things outside of their spectrum of work. I don't know, whether it's gardening or learning an instrument or whatever it is. In this day and age, one of the most important skills is learning agility. And that's the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn, especially in the age of AI where everything's happening so fast. So it's just getting in the habit, to close out the loop on culture of learning, getting in the habit of making learning fun, exciting, and something that you share with your team members.
Wow. The learning agility, I found myself often, my last role before Speak with People, I led a good number of Gen Z age leaders. And I had a count to make sure that I didn't say it, but I didn't want to say, well, I've tried that and it didn't work. Because the older you get, the more time you've attempted lots of things. And especially Gen Z leaders or millennials, they come to you with all these new ideas and they think sometimes, just like I did, this was the first time anybody has ever thought of that. I didn't realize at that point that there's really nothing new under the sun. But the worst thing I could do is not have learning agility and shoot them all down. And it kills that culture. What are some of
I got a question for you. What were you able to do to shift that mindset to help yourself become more open to what they had to say?
That's a great question. One of the things that was very helpful is my oldest is a late Gen Z. And so she would point it out, if she was witnessing, an interaction and she could just tell when it was coming, so she'd like give me the sign, like, don't do it. Don't say it, Dad. But also just some of the things that you've already mentioned, looking for ways to keep asking them those kind of open-ended questions. Well, tell me more about that. How would you go about it? What would you do differently? Just trying to pull out those ideas. So I didn't do that. Way back in the day when I was trying to better myself as a public speaker, so some speaker taught me to put a rubber band on. And I had a bad habit of racing back and forth on the stage because I had all this energy, didn't know what to do. And so he's like, hey, every time you do it, just snap yourself with a rubber band. And I was like, oh man, those added up really quickly. So that's, something I had to do to make sure I did it.
That's a good little tip.
Yeah, I didn't have to, I didn't come to that. So, okay, we want to grow. We want to learn as leaders. We want to keep improving ourselves. Especially I found with some of the client communication skills training we're doing, the sales training, the, helping people. Yes, the older we get into I've been doing this for so long. Why change now? Other than that obstacle, what are some of the other obstacles that prevent us from, having a pattern of learning, trying to find new ways? What are some of those other self-imposed obstacles that we put in the way?
Well, one thing I want to touch on before I answer that is talking about the importance of communication with customers. We recently went through, we interviewed over 100 clients who really enjoyed working with Learn It and some who churned and went away. And on both sides of the fence, the ones who enjoyed working with us and some of the negative feedback we got, on the positive side, they would say is because they were really good at communicating and it was really clear in the directions. They had a great experience. And on the flip side, some of the ones that we had challenges with, they thought that there was a disconnect in communication. So I just think it's just so important when it comes to client relations and sales and working with your customers. Now, to answer your question, what gets in the way of learning sometimes? The number one excuse I like to say is lack of time. I don't have time to take classes, or I'm too busy. And I like to give people the I say, oh, that's interesting. Maybe in a minute or two later, I'll say, have you watched any good Netflix shows lately? And they'll list off like the 5 different shows they're watching, and I'll come back with, hey, by the way, if you just carved out 20 minutes every morning and read something, read a
Yep.
book, read an article, or even just got curious and asked people questions, that's all you need to do to continue to keep your learning going. I'm not saying you need to
Wow.
take a month's worth of workshops all the time, but I think time is typically the biggest reason why people say that they don't have a continuous learning mindset. They don't have time to do it. That's their excuse. Number two, let's face it, learning is hard.
Mm.
It takes you have to be in the mindset that you got to be open to change. And sometimes, leaders or people in an organization, they don't want to have to learn something new because that's going to require them to change their behavior. And
Oof.
and people are not always open to change. So I think that that's also another very important one. And then three, it kind of just goes back to what we're already saying. If you're working in an organization who's not going to set aside the time and give people the time and space to learn, then people are not going to do it. And the problem with that one is if you have high performing individuals, especially the younger generations, but everybody, they're not going to stay in your organization if you just keep them in a box, right? They want the opportunities to learn and grow. And as a leader, you're going to lose top talent if you don't provide people the opportunity to learn.
Wow. Wow. Boy, I love that.
And one thing I want to add to that, as we talk about learning, I had this guy on my show, phenomenal guest. His name is David Katz, the founder of Plastic Bank, and he said, "Learning without doing is treason," and that is so true. You could read 50 books, you can take every class, you can do some work with you on presentation or communication, but at the end of the day, if you don't find ways to apply what you learn, you're not doing yourself any good.
Mm.
So when I'm reading a leadership book or taking a class or even listening to a podcast, I'm looking for ways that I can connect what I'm learning with how it's going to help me either professionally or personally.
Wow. Wow. I love that. I was thinking as you were talking about the companies, uh, I had another San Francisco company like you all,
Mhm.
Nancy Duarte on the podcast last year
Oh,
from
you did? I heard
Duarte.
she's phenomenal.
Whew. Yes. Just brilliant. And I asked her, is it larger companies that are the ones that are spending, more resources like you talked about, even 1 to 2%? Is it smaller
Mhm.
companies? What do you find in this? Do smaller companies say, we don't have the budget to be able to do anything, so they just kind of throw out the whole idea?
What's your definition of a smaller company? Like 10 employees or 200? Everybody's got their own definition.
Yeah, for me, a smaller company, yeah, I would definitely say, the size that I'm talking about, 20 and under,
Mhm.
employees under.
Yeah, I would say it's less about size. It's even less about industry. I mean, at Learn It, we're industry agnostic. We work across the board. We have a ton of nonprofit customers through tech startups. And I think at the end of the day, it's not about your company size or your industry. It's about the mindset of the
Mm.
leaders in the organization. Do you look at investing in your people as an expense, like a line item of a cost, or do you look at it as a something that's going to catapult growth and how you look at it? And so it's across the board. I would say we work with, I don't know. I mean, some of our biggest clients are like Gilead Sciences and other massive customers. But I'd say a lot of times our sweet spot are organizations who have 100 to 1,000 employees who really value learning and don't have an internal learning team. So they partner with a company like Learn It, who we could be their outsourced L&D partner.
Don't just hope for better client conversations. Equip yourself for them. The Speak with Your Client series is live from April 14th to May 30th, packed with powerful tools to help you build trust and close more deals without being salesy. Catch expert-led podcasts, weekly blogs, live webinars on Mondays, and grab your free copy of the High Trust Sales Playbook. Make sure you're following Speak with People on all the socials. Join the speakers group on Facebook or the Speak with Your Client LinkedIn group just for the series. Don't miss a moment. Everything's waiting for you at speakwithpeople.com/speakwithyourclient. Your next client is counting on it. Oh, I love that. I was thinking as you were talking years ago, worked for a big company. We had so many great medical benefits. If I walked so many steps a
Mhm.
day, I could track it. If I did, the physical, I could track it. What would be interesting is, if they transferred that, and maybe some companies already do,
Mhm.
but not just from the physical health standpoint, but from the learning health. If there were some type of reward system upon that too, so many classes you took, or books that you read, or podcasts that you listened to, or that you would actually get some type of reward, or the ability to, not that we're probably going to be earning Caribbean cruises for the amount of books we read, but some type of reward for that kind of investment.
That's one of the talking points when I give keynotes on creating a culture of learning is the reward system. And that's something that great organizations do. They highlight the individuals within their organization who are dedicating themselves to learning. That is very, very important. I'm glad you brought that up. Where I thought you were going with that, when you were talking about medical benefits and everything, we have some of our customers, like Yosemite Conservancy, excuse me, where on all their job descriptions it says, on their job postings, it says one of the benefits of working here are learning and development classes at Learn It to help enhance your skills.
Wow, I love that. Well, it's like if you go to HubSpot, right? You can earn free. I don't know if it's free, or I don't know how much it is, but you can get certificates, for going through individual classes. What a great opportunity for those employees at that company, to be able to get, those different kind of things as well. Because it seems like some companies, it's like, okay, we get people in the door, okay, do the job, and we don't really give them a long roadmap or a pipeline to some leadership success. So it's
Mhm.
like, hey, if you want to get, I remember leading a young leader once, and they'd been there 6 months, and they're like, okay, when can I get to the C-suite? And I was like, hey, boy, I love that, but you're probably gonna have to spend more than 6 months, doing the
Oh yeah,
job. You're gonna you're gonna have to learn. But if we give them like a consistent, like my mom's
a
a
roadmap.
counselor, so she has to do so much every year to keep her licensing and training. But most companies, it's not like that. What if we even had a little bit where it's like, hey, this year we want you to accomplish this much learning and development, because that will help lead to other
Mhm.
positions in the future.
Yeah, I've seen some great organizations. I had a woman on my show named Dr. Angela Stopper, who's a chief learning officer at UC Berkeley, who you should
Mm.
have on your show, and she's responsible for the learning programs for 9,000 individuals, and it's weaved into performance reviews and job descriptions.
Wow.
Again, so it's like it's I don't want to say it's a requirement, but there's 80 hours. Per year per employee, I think it is, that's set aside. And so it needs to be built into the fabric of your organization, and especially if you're an organization who has middle managers, a lot of times it gets stuck there, right? Because
Ooh.
middle managers are so overwhelmed, trying to keep the C-level happy and working with their teams, that it's hard for them to allow individuals on their team to go out and carve out time for training. And so I think that in organizations like that, you start with the middle managers, give them the opportunity for learning, so they could see firsthand how valuable it is, and also see how and why it benefits them and impacts them by allowing their people to go and become more efficient and pick up skills and close the skills gap that they need to close.
Wow. Boy, I love that. I was thinking as you were laying that out, good amount of the events that I speak at for financial world, uh, financial advisors, wholesalers, market specialists, some of those kind of things. I don't, I say this with the most humility that I can muster,
Mhm.
but some of these events are the boringest uh, environments. It's like, it's great that they got their people away for a couple of days,
Mhm.
but they didn't really put any. any effort into, well, let's think about transitions and let's make sure the learning environments. I was in Charleston last fall and the room was 80 degrees. People are in jackets, like there's nothing worse as a speaker than when people are fanning themselves, you
Oh yeah,
know.
they're falling asleep. That's why you go to a casino in Vegas and it's freezing cold in there, keeps everybody
Right.
awake.
Right. You
Yeah.
want to stay awake. So talk to us for a second. I know that, learning and development, it's great to happen, over the process, but when we are doing events or we're planning for some things, some things that you've noticed, how can we make those kind of lasting, more sticky?
Well, if you want your learning and development programs, let's call it that, or leadership programs to be successful, it can't be a check the box, like
Mm,
where you just check a box and you just throw it out there. It's got to be purposeful and intentional. So again, you sit down either internally or with an organization like Learn It, and you kind of roadmap out and design a program that's gonna be successful, and it also starts with the communication, internal communication for the organization, because we've seen a lot of organizations who will invest in training, but the word doesn't get out, so they're not communicating it enough.
oof.
You can't have a successful program if it's underutilized and people are even unaware that it's happening. And then what's also super important, and this is almost like having a warm room where everybody's falling asleep, is that if you work for a manager or a leader who isn't bought in to learning and development, and you're taking a course and your manager is texting you, hey, you need to get this done, or guilting you about the work responsibilities. So it's getting buy-in from the leaders. I think it's
Yeah.
so important to get buy-in from the leaders to allow people to do training. And organizations like Learn It help the leaders understand, like, here are some prompts that people are going to learn in these classes. So maybe help keep them accountable afterwards, because as you know, and I know, you can't come to one of your keynote speeches or just take one class at Learn It and then turn around and be an expert at something. Learning is hard,
Yes.
right? So to make it sticky, you got to have conversations around what you learned. You got to do role playing. You got to do practice sessions when it comes to keynote speaking. You got to do all that work, and having
Yep.
either your leader or somebody on your team or something that keeps you accountable to continue to put in motion what you learned is beyond critical.
Wow. I love that. So powerful. It's what I love about Learn It, especially is as I've gone through your online catalog and getting to know the different courses. And, first of all, I love that the first section is just human skills, because it should be just obvious, but I think human skills are getting harder and harder nowadays because we're so used to everything happening, in so blink of a second with our devices, with, everything else. So even to have, some of that to be able to go, okay, all right, I, I, I I need some of these to be able to do. And I think that starts with, you mentioned in the very, very beginning, just about the ability to receive feedback. And it seems like this is something that, many leaders are so adverse to because they're like, I've been doing this the same way. I'll get the 120 no's, but eventually somebody will go for it. Walk us through, just if you're a manager, how to model that, and then, give us a couple of thoughts, for leaders to be able to go, okay, I got to ask for some more feedback here.
Great question. I mean, if you go on Amazon or Google and you look up feedback, you'll probably find 1,000 books on giving feedback, but very few on receiving feedback.
Ooh,
And so, how to best model it, I think, is, well, first of all, it works best in organizations where there's a pretty decent level of trust already. Um, so here's a couple of tips for leaders out there on how to extract real feedback from your team. Number one is, if you're working in person, get out of your office. You know, the dynamics of somebody coming into your office and giving you feedback in your office is probably going to be different than if you happen to go over to their office and ask them a question. I mean, it's just a different, it's a different playing field. So that's one little tip. Another example that I actually shared with you, I think, when it came to writing my book, is that because let's face it, if CEO of a company or a leader in an organization, it could be uncomfortable to give somebody, critical feedback. And so what I like to do is open the door for somebody to allow them to feel more comfortable. Oof. And so the example that I gave you with my book was, there's a guy on my team who you might have met named Nick Silverthorne, and he's like the target audience, the target profile persona for reading the Learn It All leader. It's a high performer who's looking to get either into leadership or get from regular leadership into senior leadership or become a founder. And so I gave him a chapter of my book, and I said, hey, look, Nick, can you read this? And I really want your honest feedback, because I'm not sure that I'm getting my point across too well right here. And I want to see if you think it's confusing or what your thoughts are. And what I did right there, Jason, is I said, I had enough vulnerability to say that maybe this isn't as good as I want it to be. What do you think? What's some of your feedback? And that opens the door for him to be able to say, you know what, Damon, you're right. I think that you could have a little bit more practical advice here or make this a little cleaner. So just presenting it, reaching out to somebody and sharing with them, hey, look, I want your feedback, and see what you have to say. And obviously, the third tip is that if somebody is giving you feedback, don't receive it in a way where your body language is, you're like this, with your arms crossed, or you got this look on your face.
Yep.
And then the very first second you have, you just jump down their throat and debate them or argue with them, because, for your listeners out there, feedback, what is it? It's data for you. It doesn't mean that every single thing somebody tells you is correct and you need to automatically go and turn things around and do things differently and implement what they're saying. It's data for you. And I can't imagine being a great leader if, once again, you're a yes person and everybody has to tell you what it is you want to hear. I mean, in your head, you're probably a great leader, but at the end of the day, I try to get as much feedback as possible. I mean, I think I've gotten better at being a podcast guest or a podcast host, but I've reached out to so many people, and I'm like, just tell me what you think. Especially with the work we do at Learn It, where we do some communication classes and sales classes and stuff, and I'm just like, where can I get better at? And my final tip is, when somebody gives you feedback and you happen to implement it, thank them. Send them a little note, shoot them an email and say, hey, by the way, remember when you told me that I could have done this differently? Here's an example of me applying it. And when you do that, it's going to first of all, it creates a lot of trust with your team and people. Second of all, you're going to see people giving feedback, peer-to-peer feedback, which Keith Ferrazzi talks about in his great book, Never Lead Alone, peer-to-peer feedback and communication. And third of all, they're going to come to you with ideas bubbling up from everywhere, because they know that, hey, even if you're not going to implement it all the time, it does move the needle, and they feel like they're much more valued. And at the end of the day, people want to feel like they have a purpose and they belong at work. And if you're able to receive feedback, that's just one more way that your employees will be even more motivated to work for you.
Oh, I love this. I love this, especially for our sales professionals who are, client-focused leaders who are one-on-one with people all day long. We do it so much. We've got to take a second to go, hey, maybe you grab, another employee, or you grab your boss, especially, and say, hey, role play with me a little bit and let me know how this comes across, how this sounds.
Yeah, I got a good example. I mean, I assume a lot of the sales leaders and professionals that you work with, Jason, or that are listening to this, they use Chorus or Gong or Fathom, these recordings. All of our calls are recorded. And one of the most exciting and best things that we do every week in a sales meeting with our 10 reps, we'll go through a call. And so one week, Taylor, let's say on our team, we'll watch one of her discovery calls, and then the team will chime in and give feedback. Hey, you did this really well, or
Oh,
here's something that you could have done differently. And we've created a safe enough space where she's not feeling like she's being criticized, and
yep.
that we're trying to help her. So it's coming from when feedback can come from a position of, hey, we have your back, we want you to do better. I mean, it's an absolute game changer.
Wow. Wow. Well, you've really just opened up the vault here, and I so appreciate it. Before we kind of turn the corner and finish the interview, we're in this series called "Speak with Your Client, Not at Them." Speak with your client. So as you hear that phrase, as you think about it, what's the first thing that kind of comes to mind? What's for your own leadership? How do you kind of view that through that lens?
The first thing that comes to mind for me is simple. It's not us versus them. It's a partnership. It's a
Oof.
collaboration. And I think that's really, really important, because as a sales professional, you want to be a trusted advisor. And it's not about just, speaking at them with your features and benefits. It's having business acumen, being curious, and trying to help them solve their problems. And the best way to do that, Jason, is through a collaborative conversation and working together with them. So that's what comes to mind for me.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, we are building an online communication library where people can go and be inspired to find new resources. And so we ask all of our guests a couple of questions. The first being, do you have a favorite speaker? Every time you hear this person, whether it's a TED Talk or it's they're just talking on TikTok, whatever it is there somebody that
Daniel
just
Pink.
stands out? Daniel Pink.
Yeah, Daniel Pink.
I love it. Is there a podcast, if you're a podcast listener, that's either a guilty pleasure or development that you just highly recommend?
I love Smartless, and with Jason Bateman and all those other guys. And I think that there are a lot of learning lessons in there when you get people that you hear their stories, whether it's Arnold Schwarzenegger or other ones. I think that there's great learning lessons in there.
I love it. Lastly, you run into somebody uh, and they're going to a desert island, and you're like, oh,
Mhm.
you have to take this book with you. What's that one book you send them with?
The one book I send them with would be, gosh, that's an interesting one. I I'm always a big fan of Sir Richard Branson's work.
Mm.
Losing my virginity, finding my virginity. I mean, that's a great business book. If I wanted to read a captivating real life crime story, it would be Red Notice, which is an incredible. Not the movie that's on Netflix or whatever, but Red Notice, about Russia and one gentleman's crusade about working in Russia, is one book that once you pick up, you can't put down.
Oh, I love it. This is fantastic. Well, tell us, our listeners, where we can find everything we can about you, where we can get your book, all of the resources for your company.
So connect with me on LinkedIn, Damon Lembi, and check out my podcast, the Learn It All podcast. Jason keeps rescheduling on me. I got to get him on there soon, and he's a busy guy. And then you can go to learnit.com is our company website. And then finally, I have two books, and they are on Amazon.
Perfect. Well, we will, for our listeners, we'll put that in the speakers group on Facebook and our brand new Speak with Your Client LinkedIn group. That's all about client communication. And so we'll put all that information in the show notes. Damon, truly an honor. Every time we get to talk, I leave more encouraged, challenged, and you have helped my leadership grow. So thank you for being on the podcast.
I always enjoy talking to you. You get me pumped up, and we always have fun conversations. So thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Speak with People podcast. It means the world to us when you share this episode. Thanks for liking, subscribing, or following the podcast. That really does help the podcast get into more ears and into more leaders listening. Also, don't forget, we have 2 exciting resources for you. The first is go to Facebook and join the Speakers Group. This is a community designed for leaders who want to grow their communication skills. Also, go to speakwithpeople.com/skills library to access the Communication Skills Library. It is an online resource chock filled with resources that will inspire you and transform you and grow your communication skills. Thanks again for being a part of the listening community. We cannot wait for the next episode.